we're recording, and
So you're the LP on this?
so we've got Trevor
Floor, like the ground. Like the ground, yeah.
Okay, Trevor Flor, and he is here to talk about 1031 exchange. I think that there are some real opportunities here, and he does a really thorough, good job. So let's give him a little bit of a hand for showing up. And remember, they don't see your face until you get up there, so you might go, "Yeah, it's me, Trevor."
Hey, it's me. Well, you guys deserve the round of applause because it's a beautiful day out. Instead of being out there, you're here learning some stuff. So, because it's a small enough group, I had about an hour planned to present, but maybe so I can customize it, I guess, to our audience. Can I ask each of you to just introduce yourself? Tell me if you own property here in Santa Barbara and what you're hoping to get out of today's session. You want to start?
Sure. I'm a real estate agent and a mortgage lender. We own investment property, not here in Santa Barbara, but we do have, well, I'll let you say about
Okay. All right.
Hi, I'm Jim. By day, I'm an architect.
Okay.
At night and weekends, I'm an investor. I'm with my wife. As she mentioned, we do have properties, not here in Santa Barbara, but we do have property here in California, and then 5, 6 on the East Coast.
Okay. All right. Great. And how about you?
Hey, I'm Alex. My day job is I work in quantum computing. I do research at Google on quantum computers. I also do investing in real estate, mostly at the moment through passive syndication as an LP. And then I also run a business where I create these accounts that yield 8% liquid for clients, and I take that money and I reinvest it and make pocket difference between that 8% yield and whatever I can make on it.
Okay. Very cool, Alex.
Hey, I'm Dustin. By day, I own a sales and marketing company. We help cannabis brands, but I'm looking to kind of get out of that space and move more full-time into real estate. I've just partnered with a local construction company to run lead generation for ADU construction for them. And I'm also started a wholesaling company, so kind of dabbling in all of this, and saw that you guys meet here and thought I'd take the opportunity to come and introduce myself. So thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dustin.
My name is Ryan. I'm a real estate agent at Village Properties in Montecito, and I'm looking to get into real estate investment personally
Okay.
myself. So that's it.
Awesome. Nice to meet you, Ryan.
Thanks.
I know a lot of your colleagues. Actually, I had coffee with Cara Gambardella over at the State Street
Sweet.
office just yesterday. So,
Nice.
Ryan, Dustin, Alex, Jim, and I didn't get your name.
Tamara.
Tamara. All right. Nice to meet you, everybody. My name's Trevor Flor. I'm a financial advisor, and I specialize in real estate syndications and 1031 exchanges. So we're going to talk today about 1031 exchanges and an investment vehicle called the DST, or Delaware Statutory Trust. Just by way of disclosure, this is not tax, legal, or investment advice. Here are the areas we're going to discuss. I'll introduce myself and firm in a little more detail. We'll talk about exchanges, and then we'll move into talking about Delaware statutory trusts. We'll do a quick case study where we incorporate a DST into a 1031 exchange, and then I'll leave you with my contact info if anyone wants to stay in touch. So I founded Aimpoint Investments with the purpose of exclusive focus on real estate investments. We do offer some oil and gas. The two areas in yellow we're here to talk about are the 1031 exchange and the DST. That's my core focus. However, we do offer real estate investments located in qualified opportunity zones, as well as just private equity style investments for development projects, distressed purchases, value add, those kind of projects. Those do not qualify, neither of the qualified opportunity zone or the direct real estate investments are qualifying for 1031 exchanges. My personal background, as president of Aimpoint Investments, I hold a FINRA Series 7 and 66 license. I went to UCSB. I'm very proud to be back in Santa Barbara. I actually just moved back about 6 months ago. Started my career at Coldwell Banker, so Ryan, not too far from where your office is in Montecito. The Sotheby's is occupying that space now. But I moved into a commercial acquisitions role with a local private medical office portfolio called Montecito Medical. So I was underwriting and sourcing deals all across the country in the $20 to $100 million range for standalone surgical centers, medical office buildings. I left town for a brief period to serve in the Navy. So I left in 2007, served in the Navy, and got out in 2017, and I've been focused on this work since I've been back in the private sector. So with that, we'll jump right into 1031 exchanges. And I want to identify the problem that the 1031 exchange is meant to solve. I assume everyone has just at least heard of a 1031 exchange. Has anyone not? Okay, cool. Well, the problem that we're looking to solve here is really a tax problem. And when we sell a piece of property that qualifies under the primary residence test, that's living in the property or occupying the property as a primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years, we're entitled to take what's called the Section 121 exclusion, where we exclude up to $500,000 of capital gains if we're married. If we're selling an investment property and we don't meet the primary residence test, we get no such exclusion. But we get a more powerful tool called the 1031 exchange. If we don't exchange, we're subject to 4 layers of tax. Every dollar that we depreciated the investment property during our ownership period gets recaptured on sale, usually at a 25% tax rate. We also, if the property appreciated, we're subject to long or short-term federal capital gain tax at 20 or 15% income dependent. Income dependent, again, we're subject to a net investment income tax of 3.8%, and then we've got 0 to 13.3% state income taxes. Any guesses on what state that 13.3% is?
California.
California.
Good question.
Yeah,
Are you doing this just in California or do you do it nationwide?
nationwide. So, yep.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of a feel how it is to work with other states compared to California?
Yeah, well, so I've got clients right now in about 15 states. The nice thing about being a financial advisor is, unlike a real estate license where we're state licensed, we have a simple process to register. So I can work with clients anywhere, I just have to get registered there. The economic case to do a 1031 exchange is most profound here in California because of that added state layer of tax. California conforms to the federal policy with one minor exception, and that is called a clawback provision. So when you sell an asset in California, you can defer all those layers of tax, but if you ever sell that future replacement property and don't perform an exchange, California will claw back their portion of tax. States that don't have the clawback provision, if you exchange out of the state and then you sell the asset, the original state will not claw back their tax. They don't have any tax, you don't have tax owed at that point.
But California does.
But California does. But we can keep doing exchanges, we'll talk a little more about it, but I want to highlight just why we're talking about capital gain tax. So I want to show you how just arithmetic will demonstrate how impactful a lifetime of paying capital gain tax is. So I want to run an exercise here where we start with $1 and we double it 5 times. This is meant to kind of demonstrate or represent a lifetime of owning property and selling it, where we double each time. If we do that only 5 times, and we have a scenario where we pay just a 30% total capital gain tax and a scenario where we don't, the total without a capital gain tax is $16. If we were paying a 30% capital gain tax on each double, we have $8.35. So we have about double the amount of wealth at the end of that. Now, if somebody's really successful and really prolific, performing exchanges and doubling their money, if we did this 20 times over a lifetime, it's 95% less wealth that we're generating. And the idea is that we build this wealth over our lifetime, and then when we pass and our estate transfers to our heirs, all of that deferred gain that we haven't paid gets eliminated. we get a step up in basis on the date of death, and all of the deferred gain at that point is essentially eliminated. We are still subject to the estate tax, which is 15 or 30 million if you're single or married, but the capital gain tax we've deferred over our lifetime is gone. So that's the problem we're looking to solve. Section 1031 is the section of the Internal Revenue Code that outlines our opportunity to perform an exchange and defer those taxes. The actual language of the code is right there, but if we just extract out or synthesize the three most important requirements here, it's number one, that property that we're performing an exchange on has to be held for business or investment use. Number two, properties have to be like kind to each other. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're single-family residence for single-family residence. It just means that it's investment property for investment property. We'll talk a little more about that. And then finally, that we have to structure the transaction as an exchange. So we can't sell a property and then just decide to go buy one and call it an exchange. There is a process that we have to comply with to satisfy this provision. So let's talk about the types of exchanges. The first is the one everyone thinks of, where we sell a relinquished investment property, and then under certain timelines we purchase a replacement investment property. That's called a delayed or a forward exchange. 90% of the exchanges we see fall under this classification. But we can do that in reverse. So if we find a replacement property we like first, we can purchase that and then sell the relinquished. Those are a little more costly. It requires a little more administration. We're not going to talk in more detail about the reverse exchange today, but just know that is an option. We can also do a simultaneous exchange. I've never seen this done, but you can basically swap titles and on the same day and call that an exchange. And this one is a little more popular. This is an improvement exchange, and that's where we're actually using the exchange funds from the property that we sold to improve the replacement property. So we acquire it, and we still have some exchange funds left over, and we can utilize those funds to improve the replacement property. Yeah?
Could you do this improvement on your existing property?
No, you
No.
cannot.
Okay.
This has to be a new property, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And if you're, I'm trying to think of even how that would work, because where would the funds come from, right? If you're
From the property.
improving your existing property.
Yeah.
So like, you'd have to sell something to have funds available, right, that you want to shelter the gains
Oh, I
on.
see. Right.
So this would only work if you sold a property, you had funds available to reinvest, and we're using that on our replacement property to improve.
I see.
And it can't be a property we currently own, if maybe that was on your mind as well.
Yeah.
Yep,
So 90% of what you're doing is a delayed forward.
correct.
Now, the last time you spoke, and I asked you if you've ever thought of or done a lease to purchase through a delayed forward,
Mhm.
and I don't think that you said that you had. Do you have any experience with having done something like that?
It can be done. I don't see that very often. The reason is we'll get a little technical with this, but at a high level, there are two ways to do what you're describing. There's an installment sale, and there's a seller carried financing, right? The reason that matters is it's when the deed transfers.
Right.
So if it's an installment sale, the deed is going to transfer on the last installment.
Right.
If it's seller carried financing, the deed transfers immediately, but the
Right.
seller carries the note. They're treated differently in the exchange. The more complex one is the installment sale.
Okay, because somehow in my mind, I'm thinking if you had a lease to own for
Mhm.
maybe 2 or 5 years, whatever, you could then sell your home, and the day that you sold your home without being desperate because you only had 180 days,
Mhm.
then you exercise the lease to purchase and immediately purchase that property, and you've solved a lot of, on either side. One is, I've got to hurry up and find something, or I've got to hurry up and sell my property, and both of those really put you in a tight spot where you may have to give up a lot of equity just to make it happen.
Yeah, I think I understand. your question better now, Dan. So you're asking if you have a lease to own on a replacement property.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah, I haven't seen that done, but certainly you could do that. You just can't. What matters is the closing date on the purchase.
On
So
the purchase.
whether you had a pre-existing lease leading up to the closing is irrelevant.
Most lease to purchase is you've got an option to buy whenever you want to.
Mm-hmm.
30 days, 15 days, whatever. You just exercise it
Yeah.
once you've sold your house.
Right.
To me, that just sounds like you have a lot better opportunity to maximize the purchase or the sale.
Yeah. If there's a benefit to do that, you could certainly structure it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you could create an option, on a property to lock it up in a similar fashion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. When we initiate a 1031 exchange, so first talk to somebody. We get calls very often from people that sold their property and they call me up and they say, I want to do an exchange. And we ask, when did you sell your property, or what's the status? And they said, oh, we closed last week. Who's your QI? Where's your accommodator? And they don't know anything about how to structure the exchange, and the exchange fails at that point. So first, talk to somebody if you're thinking about it. If you know somebody thinking about it, tell them to talk to somebody who can answer questions. A very important step here is we need to engage the qualified intermediary. This has to be done before the sale of the relinquished property. This is part of what makes this an exchange, is the owner or the seller is never taking what's called constructive receipt of the proceeds from the sale. They're going to go directly to the qualified intermediary. They're going to be held. We want to make sure we select a QI that's qualified and certainly bonded and insured. We use over 70 QIs across the country to refer clients to. There's a couple good ones in this area that we refer to. So if anybody needs an accommodator, please reach out.
As you're doing this, how much percentage-wise would you say you do for people who want to occupy what they're purchasing as opposed to do it for an investment and not live in it?
So a requirement is that we're trading investment property for investment
You
property.
have to live in it.
We cannot live in the property.
Oh, it has to be investment.
It has to be an investment property.
Okay,
Yep.
that works.
Is there a certain period of time, does it have to be an investment property in perpetuity of your ownership, or is there a point where you can take residency?
Yeah, Jim, good question. And the answer is yes, you can convert uses. We're going to talk a little more about that, but to answer your question, there is a 1 to 2 year period where before the exchange and after the exchange, the property has to meet the classification of held for investment. Yep. And that's going to be up to facts and circumstances. We'll dig into that a little bit more. And then the final piece I have here is just when we engage the QI, they're going to need some information. Part of the exchange structuring is that you actually have to assign the purchase and sale agreement to the QI. So you have to fill out some paperwork to engage the QI. They usually ask for about a week before closing to prepare the exchange account and get those documents in order.
And is that based on a dollar amount or a like-kind exchange, meaning a house for a house, not a house for vacant land?
That doesn't impact the timing here. All of those, if I'm understanding your question, is it related to engaging the qualified intermediary?
No, it's just a 1031 exchange.
Yeah, you can certainly trade property types. So you can sell a single family residence that's a rental, and you can purchase vacant land.
As long as it's in the price range that you need?
Well, we'll talk about the
Okay.
exchange equation, but as long as it meets the requirement of held for investment.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll talk a little more about that, Dan.
Okay.
And here's one of the points here. So the property has to be held for investment. Jim, you talked about converting use, so here's the 1 or 2 years. CPAs and attorneys are going to weigh in on this. Let me give you a couple examples here. So if the exchange is audited, the IRS is going to look at facts and circumstances to determine investment intent. This is, if anybody digs into the tax code, there's a lot of gray in the tax code. One attorney or CPA will tell you one thing and another will tell you something very different. What matters is, if the exchange gets audited, that you can demonstrate investment intent. So I'll give you an example. We had a client who he purchased as a replacement property, a condominium on Brickell Avenue in Miami. He put a high net worth tenant in the property. He put a long-term 12 or 18 month lease on the property. And 3 months after they signed the lease, the tenant came to him with an unsolicited offer at like a 30% premium to what he paid. And he said, I'm gonna do it. So he took the offer and he wanted to do another exchange. We went to the CPA that he worked with, and his CPA said, that's fine. The facts and circumstances say that you bought this as an investment, you signed a long-term lease, and you got an unsolicited offer to sell the property. 3 months of ownership, that's okay. We're gonna go ahead and do an exchange on this. The exchange wasn't challenged, but that's a set of circumstances where holding less than the 1 year or 2 years is acceptable. Now here's the opposite. We had an example, there's a well-known case in the early 2000s where a developer acquired a piece of land to develop on. They went through an entitlement or retitlement process to get the zoning and the permitting. 9 years later, they still hadn't gotten it rezoned to their satisfaction, so they turned around and sold the land at a huge gain and tried to perform a 1031 exchange. The exchange was audited, and they felt, because they owned it 9 or 10 years, that that was acceptable to show investment intent. But the IRS took the position and the exchanger failed because the IRS demonstrated they bought it for the purpose of development, for the purpose of sale, not for investment. So that's where a holding period is simply a factor. So to convert use would fall under the same rules. You can certainly convert an investment property to a second home or a primary residence, but we'd want to make sure we're demonstrating our investment intent around the exchange. And then same taxpayer rule. This comes into play more frequently when there are partnerships, and if we own the property as a partnership, generally the partnership is the taxpayer, and so the partnership has to perform the exchange. Where we see challenges is when we want to break up partnerships or co-ownerships in the exchange. That can be problematic. Dan, it looks like you had a question.
I'm just thinking that's a gray area, and it's almost like if you're dealing with the IRS, it doesn't matter what all the advice you get,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they've got the law,
Yeah.
and you've got to abide by it.
It's a lot of the areas of Section 1031 haven't yet been challenged or determined. What I will say, the IRS is not well staffed at the moment, and the IRS is not challenging a lot of 1031 exchanges. That is not true at the state level in California. California is quite aggressive about auditing and challenging exchanges that aren't clean. Yeah,
Quick
Jim.
question. As in our case, we have we have properties in different states.
Mhm.
And you did mention about doing an exchange, one property in one state to a different property in a different state. Which state's laws and rules govern in that exchange? Maybe you mentioned it, but
Yeah, primarily the property that is being sold, you're going to be looking at their state rules. And then you purchase in another state,
Right.
when you sell that property, we're going to have to look at that state rules at that point. But if you're buying in a new state, that state doesn't have any right to the capital gain that was recognized in the relinquished property state.
Right.
So we don't really have to look to them for any guidance. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I imagine you've been in this long enough to probably ask questions in AI. How close is it to actually being able to interpret the true legality of some of what you're talking about?
I've asked AI a variety of questions, and the challenge with AI is AI gives you an answer.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. That you want to hear.
Yeah. And it gives you an answer and people start making decisions.
Right.
And a lot of this stuff, as I said, hasn't been challenged by district or tax court, so we don't know what position tax authorities are going to take in some of these areas.
Right.
So what I would like to see AI develop into is a range of aggressive versus conservative perspectives on certain rules.
And advise you to get back to somebody who knows
Yes,
and works in
ultimately,
that business.
absolutely. We should be talking to our CPAs, we should be talking to our attorneys.
Right.
I can give conceptual guidance, I help you understand what questions to ask, but ultimately I don't give tax or legal advice myself.
Oh,
I give investment advice.
okay.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we were talking about like what the state law applies when they property. Does the state of residence of the person also matter in this case basically clawback rules.
It does. So if the property is being sold in a state that you do not reside in, you would be obligated to pay, if we did do an exchange, you would be obligated to pay a capital gain tax to the state where the capital gain was sourced. You will also report that gain on your personal return in the state that you reside, but you get a credit for what you paid the other state. So, for example,
So but if you don't pay anything because of that exchange,
yes.
you still have to deal with the exchange in your resident state?
So you would still report the exchange to your resident state, but I don't believe they have any jurisdiction to challenge the exchange in the way, that's actually a good question. Let me circle back to you on that. Because we are going to report the exchange on our residence return, or the state return that we reside in. So they may have an opportunity to challenge the exchange as well, even though it was conducted out of their jurisdiction. Let me get back to you on that.
And similarly, you know, when you say if you sell property, you know, at a later date if you leave California, for example, you're saying there's these clawback rules.
Mm-hmm.
Do those apply if you sold the property in another state?
Yes. If this original gain was sourced from California.
Well, if you were residing in California and you sold the property, let's say in Iowa or whatever it is.
The answer is no to that question. So California's clawback applies to properties where the gain was generated in California.
I see.
Yep. So the clawback only applies, and they do it kind of a funny way. There's a form that you file with the California Franchise Tax Board to say, I still own my replacement property that's located, let's say we sold in California and we bought in Nevada. I still own my Nevada property. I just file a form, whether I'm still a resident of California and filing a California tax return or not. I still file this form. I tell them I still own the Nevada property. If 10 years go by and I move out of California and I forget to file that form, they're going to think that you no longer own the Nevada property, and they're going to say, hey, we want you didn't tell us you still own it, we want our tax now. So that's the importance of filing that form. So make sure if you perform this and you take a relinquished property that was here in California and you purchase a replacement out of California, communicate with your CPA and make sure that form is being filed. Yeah.
In perpetuity of.
In perpetuity. My understanding is as soon as they don't get that form, the assumption is you've sold it and you owe us tax. Until, as we said, the estate transfers. So when you pass and the step up in the basis occurs, now there's nothing to claw back because your basis is now up to market value on the date of death. These are some important timelines. So if anybody's worked around exchanges, you're probably familiar with a 45-day ID period, a 180-day exchange period. What that means is we have a clock that starts on the day that we close on the sale of our relinquished property, and that clock extends for 45 days. Midnight on the 45th day, we have to submit an ID worksheet to our QI, and only what we've identified can we purchase after that point. But we have an additional 135 days to actually close on something that we identified. That's the 45 plus the 135 is the 180-day exchange period. Did you have a question, Jim?
I'm sure I got lots of questions.
Have you ever had that happen, like if they're moving from a slower market to a really fast market and they identify however many properties they need to, and those all sell before, so what happens then?
It is, let's talk about these, because it is absolutely a very common thing where that ID deadline, it comes very quick. And we had a client recently whose exchange almost failed because he thought, I have 45 days. So he's writing contracts on properties on day 43 and day 44, hadn't done inspections, hadn't even agreed on prices. So my advice to anyone exchanging in a forward exchange is that you're shopping for properties while your property is being marketed. Put something under contract even. You just can't close on the replacement property until the day after the sale of your relinquished property. So put something under contract with a contingency that says we're gonna move our closing date around the sale. If the seller will comply with that, great. But we have pretty restrictive identification rules. The first is we can identify 3 properties regardless of value. It seems like that's the most well-known rule. We don't use it that often, to be honest. We use the 200% rule more commonly. That's where we can identify any number of properties as long as their aggregate value doesn't exceed 2 times or 200% the value of the property being sold. And then we have an uncommon kind of default rule called the 95% rule that says we can identify any number of properties for any value so long as we close on 95% of them. So yeah,